So today I managed to catch an early screening event of SHAZAM, and I thought this would be the perfect time to give you guys my updated ranking of all 7 DCEU films now that I have seen this movie. Also, it's been a long time since I actually ranked these movies. I believe Wonder Woman was the last time that I actually ranked these films from worst to best, so it is a very outdated video, and I thought I would, update it and give you guys this ranking. So without further ado, here is my non-spoiler ranking of the DCEU films. So coming in at number 7, we are going to have Suicide Squad. Now, this movie was marketed as being very fun and entertaining, a huge tonal change from the previous DCEU films, but it ended up just being the exact same as those movies, which is just very dark and bland. I think this is a very uninteresting movie, filled with very dislikable characters and awful, cringeworthy dialogue. This is not a good movie in any way, in my opinion. I'll start off with the pros first. There's barely any. It really just bogs down to 2 performances. Harley Quinn, who is played very, very well by Margot Robbie. I think she's very great in this role. And Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis, who is a really intimidating villain in my opinion. But everybody else in this movie just does not work at all in my opinion. Even Will Smith, who a lot of people really like as Deadshot, to me feels very miscast. He does not come across as intimidating at all. I know the other members, besides Rick Flag and Diablo, just feel like they're kind of just there. They don't really do much. Boomerang, Croc, Katana, they are just characters that are in the movie. They don't do anything. They never have a moment to shine. They're just there. And it sucks because those could have been some really cool characters. And that's an issue when you have this movie that is bringing a group of people together. You want everybody to kind of have their moment to shine, feel like they are important towards the group, but really, those characters don't feel like they need to be there. They feel very unnecessary. So this movie did not handle the characters well whatsoever. They are all very uninteresting and barely given any development whatsoever. The villain is really stupid in my opinion. I think that she looks awful, first of all, of her little hula movements. And then her brother, I don't even, what the hell is that CGI? So yeah, not a good movie. Definitely the worst in the DCU. Coming in at number 6, we have Justice League. And that sucks to say because I'm a really big DC fan, and all of my life I have wanted to see this group of characters being put together on the big screen, and we finally got it. It just wasn't what I wanted. Now, I don't think this is a bad movie particularly. There are definitely bad things in it, but as a whole, I think it's kind of just an average, decent film, which to some might sound kind of weird, but the reason I consider it as disappointing as I do is because this is basically DC's answer to the Avengers. It should not be this really basic average movie, but that's what we ended up getting, and it's a shame because we could have gotten so much more. There are hints of greatness in this movie, but it's bogged down by the fact that this is an hour and 40 minutes long once you take away the credits, and you're shoving in all of these characters who haven't even had their own movies yet. Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, none of these characters have been shown in the DCU before, and now they're just, full center stage without any development, and it's a shame because I think if they just had waited 3 years, given those characters those movies, and then released this film, it would have worked way more because they would have been developed, you wouldn't have had to introduce them, and it could have just been a team-up movie like the Avengers, but sadly, that's not what we got. Also, some of the returning characters I just don't think work very well. I don't think Wonder Woman was that great in this movie. She was nowhere near as charismatic as she was in her own solo film. I don't think she works very well as this character that is on screen with other characters. She kind of feels more pushed to the side in this movie. Batman was really weird in this movie, just being out in the daylight. It just doesn't look right in my opinion, and it's kind of a huge tonal shift with his character. He went from killing criminals to be kind of more laid back and cracking jokes. I don't have an issue with him making jokes when he's Bruce Wayne. There actually is some pretty darn good humor in this movie. I found it pretty funny. When Flash asked him, what's your superpower? And he's like, I'm rich. Or when he's talking to Superman at the end and he's like, I bought the bank. Moments like that were very funny and in character. It's just when he's in the suit and he's cracking jokes, it just seemed out of place to me. But yeah, so this film was very, very rushed, and it's a shame because it could have been so much better than it was. The CGI is atrocious in this movie. This movie has some of the worst visual effects I've seen in a big-budget superhero movie. I mean, seriously, this cost $300 million, and there are superhero films from a decade ago that look nicer than this movie. I don't know what the heck happened. This movie just looks horrible in my opinion. The villain sucks. Yeah, there's a lot of big issues with this movie. Just so much, disappointment thrown into one. Alright, moving on to number 5, we have Batman vs. Superman. Now, when I talk about Batman vs. Superman, I'm referring to the Ultimate Edition more than I am the regular cut, because the Ultimate Edition, in my opinion, is an improvement over the regular version. I would actually probably put Justice League above the regular version of Batman vs. Superman, but the Ultimate Edition, in my opinion, did improve a few things. Now, it is, like, a lot longer. It makes the movie like 3 hours and like 15 minutes or something, so it does extend the length by quite a bit, but it also helps a lot of the storylines. The movie feels less disjointed. It kind of explains things better. It does add another subplot, which is a little bit annoying, but it does explain a lot of the storylines more. It gives some more clarity. The editing is a little bit better. You don't have all these fade to blacks in between every single scene, something that really annoyed me in theaters. So there were definitely improvements, and from now on out, I'm probably only going to be watching the Ultimate Edition. I don't think I'll ever really go back to watch the original cut because there's no need when the Ultimate Edition is just clearly better. So yeah, now problems with this movie. I really hate Lex Luthor in this film. He feels more like Jim Carrey's Riddler than he does Lex Luthor. It's annoying because we haven't really had any accurate representations of the character of Lex Luthor. They've all been, besides the original version with Gene Hackman, they've all been very like kind of over the top and like insane people. That just doesn't work in my opinion. Why can't we just have a serious businessman who's intimidating? I don't think that's very hard to pull off. But we have crackhead, whatever his name is, doing the role, so I don't know, it's kind of frustrating. This movie also just tried to set up a lot of stuff. They tried to like set up the Justice League. They tried to introduce us to Lex Luthor and make him the villain. They tried to bring in, Doomsday. They tried to kill off Superman in the team-up movie. And then they had the fight sequence. There's like all these things going on in one movie that makes it feel overbloated, even more overbloated than Justice League in my opinion, because Justice League, while it was introducing the characters, it felt more narratively even than this movie does. This movie does have a lot of subplots besides, just the villains. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this movie had way too much stuff in it, which is why I think in a way it is worse than Justice League, but that movie was more of a disappointment for me just because of the fact that that is something I'd wanted to see, like, after so long. So yeah, there you go. Those are kind of my thoughts on this movie. I do think the action sequences in this are fantastic. I mean, that's for sure. The warehouse sequence with Batman, epic. The Batmobile chase, epic. The fight with Batman and Superman, epic. This movie did a lot of things very well from an action standpoint. I think it's just the story and the narrative that really suffers. Alright, moving on to number 4, we have Man of Steel, the very first film in the DCEU, which is now 6 years old almost, which is pretty crazy in my opinion. So, with this movie, it's kind of like a love it or hate it film. I don't really see anybody in the middle of this movie. A lot of people just seem to love it or hate it, and I'm one of those people who is kind of leaning towards the love side. Now, I don't completely love it. I don't know if I would call it great, but it's definitely a really good film in my opinion. I like the tone that it went for. It kind of has this like hopeful feel to it because you're seeing like, this character who doesn't really know their way in life becoming something greater. They're kind of like, gaining this sense of hope and trying to become a better person, becoming this hero, and I like it. I really love the way they handled the tone for this movie. I love Hans Zimmer's soundtrack. It's really nice sounding. So there was some stuff in this movie that I absolutely love. I think Zod was a really good villain. I just think that the final act was a little bit over the top. I'm not a huge fan of like the characters like throwing each other through the buildings and just completely wrecking the city, killing like tons of people in the process. Felt very over the top and stupid. Now it does kind of lead into Batman vs. Superman a bit, but I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of it back when Man of Steel came out. And I'm still not today. So yeah, overall, really, really good movie. Love the sense of hope in this movie. Henry Cavill's pretty good in the role. I don't think he has that same level of charisma that Christopher Reeves had back in the day. But this is a very different take of the character, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they'll do with this character in the future of the DCEU. Alright, moving on to number 3, we have Wonder Woman. So this was the first DCEU film that I came out of absolutely loving. I think that they really killed it with this movie. Now, over time, my opinions have changed. I don't think it's as great anymore. I do think it's a great film still, but I do think that its flaws have become more apparent to me. And the biggest flaw is its final act by far. I think this movie was pretty, solid for the most part leading up to the final act. Everything was working very well. It was this really nice, fish out of water story, which added a nice level of humor. You had Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor's relationship, two people from completely different, parts of the world, kind of crashing in. They're both kind of fish out of water stories in a way, and just seeing their relationship build over the movie was very interesting to see. I really loved that with those two characters. And, yeah, the chemistry was, like, a great part of this movie. Gal Gadot killed it in her role. Lots of charisma, like I said. The action sequences were very well shot. I'm not a fan of the slow-mo shots. Those got a little bit repetitive. It felt like whenever Wonder Woman did something cool, Patty Jenkins was like, slow it down, which was a little bit frustrating. But still, there were some amazingly well-shot action sequences, like the battle on the beach when they're on the Amazon island, or the really epic No Man's Land scene. So yeah, parts like that were epic. It's just the final act just turns into this big CGI clusterfuck like the other DCEU films love to do. They always have these big final battles in this area where there's smoke and fire and you can't really see much, and it's just a big CGI mess. Ares looks stupid too. He's basically like what's his name, Nigel Thornberry, wearing a helmet. I really hate his design. Nothing like the comics, in my opinion. And the fight was just terrible. The villains are very cartoony in this movie as well. Lieutenant Ludendorff, whatever his name is a terrible character. Very stupid and, cartoonish, in my opinion. Poison, Dr. Poison, didn't like her as well. Honestly, she should have been the main villain. Given her more development, make her more creepy, she would have been a pretty decent villain for this movie. But instead, we're left with, 3 villains, and they all feel stupid in their own way. So, yeah. Great movie, just suffers from a really bad third act. Moving on to number 2, we have Aquaman. So if there was one word I would use to explain Aquaman, it would be epic. I think this movie, from a visual / action standpoint, from a spectacle standpoint, really, is a masterpiece. I mean, this movie's special effects are absolutely beautiful. It has some of the most, amazing, vibrant locations I've seen in a film, in my opinion. From Atlantis to just seeing Italy, in its own kind of way. This movie has amazing colors. Everything looks so beautiful here. The special effects are amazing. And then the action sequences are just incredible. James Wan knows how to use a camera. You have these amazing panorama shots and these long takes of characters fighting. Everything works so well from an action standpoint. So, spectacle-wise, this is a masterpiece. I do think it suffers, however, from a little bit of an uneven narrative and really bad writing. I think the dialogue in this movie can be pretty awful sometimes. There are some moments where it just didn't seem very well written. Character interactions didn't feel genuine. For example, I thought that Aquaman and Mira's relationship felt kind of rushed. They didn't know each other that well, and then all of a sudden they just kind of fall in love. I wasn't a huge fan of that. It just felt a little bit corny, in my opinion. And, there was some really bad acting in this movie coming from some of the, smaller characters, one of the younger versions of Aquaman. It was when he was fighting, not Orm, when he was fighting whatever Willem Dafoe's character's name is, and he's kind of, training him. It was the 17-year-old version, and his dialogue was so awful, it made me cringe so hard. But, so there were definitely moments in this movie that were bad. This is not a perfect movie by far, but it is a really well-made film, like I said, with amazing effects, amazing action. I think the villain, Orm, is one of the stronger villains we've had in this franchise. I think that Patrick Wilson did a really good job playing this character. And I like the resolution that this movie has. So yeah, really good film overall. And this was definitely, for me, at the point where DC found their footing. I thought that was Wonder Woman, but then obviously Justice League happened. Alright, moving on to number 1, we have the only remaining film, and that is, of course, SHAZAM! This movie was awesome. I went into it with pretty much no expectations. The trailers didn't do that much for me, and I don't know too much about the Shazam character, so I kind of just went into it just, hoping to get a good movie, and I got a great movie. I love this film. First of all, I love Billy Batson. This is a great character. Having a 14-year-old kid become an adult, become a superhero, but still have the mind of a 14-year-old was hilarious. You have these great moments where he's doing things that only adults can do, like buying beer or going to a strip club, stuff what I would do. Not the beer part, but definitely the strip club part I would do. Things like that were just really funny and hilarious. I enjoyed seeing that with this character. I love the relationship that he had with the foster child roommate, played by Jack Dylan Grazer, who did a great job in this movie. He stole all the scenes that he was in. Very great actor who has a really good comedic presence. So the relationship was just great. I loved it. The foster family in this movie was really nice. I liked that they kind of, showcase foster families in a nice light, because a lot of movies usually have the foster families be annoying or whatever. So I don't know, I liked how they just handled that. It was a very good family film. The villain, Dr. Sivana, he wasn't a great villain. He's not going to be remembered as one of the greatest comic villains of all time, but I do like that they gave him a backstory. As a matter of fact, his backstory sequence, which I won't spoil or anything, was my favorite scene in the movie. It happens pretty early on, but it was just so well done. I mean, it was a kind of a creepy scene almost, and I just love the way they filmed it. Now, there are a group of characters in this movie, the 7 Deadly Sins, who are so creepy. Like, they terrified me. Their voices, the way they sounded, the way they looked, they were terrifying. The effects on them were fantastic. Like, those things were really creepy. So yeah, this movie was really entertaining. It was a ton of fun. And definitely go check it out when it comes out in 2 weeks. I might even go see it again, honestly, if I can find somebody that'll want to go see it, because I thought it was that much fun. So there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts on Shazam. Yeah, I'll see you all next time. Bye.